Welcome to Inside New York. America is in crisis. Over 1.5 million have been infected with the deadly coronavirus, and over 100,000 have died. At the same time, we are in the midst of an ongoing protest against police brutality as we fight for justice for George Floyd, the most recent victim of police brutality in a long line. This series is devoted to how we can move forward and survive during these crises. I can't think of a better person to have on. We welcome back on Inside New York, the NAACP New York State Conference President, Hazel DUKES. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, I listened to the town hall meeting that the NAACP is doing regularly, I believe every Wednesday, and justice for George Floyd, who we must say is the most recent murder of an innocent Black man by a police officer. But we've had also Breonna and Mr. Aubrey as well, just within a month. So what is the NAACP's action plan to address the systemic racism and police brutality today?
Let me just say that if you and America has been listening to our leadership, our president, Derek Johnson, we've been very clear that while we believe in peaceful protests, we want something beside protests. What do we get in place, which is laws and policies to hold people accountable? In every profession, there is, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a dentist, or a doctor, or teacher, and even for people in the criminal justice system, police officers, correctional officers, there is policies and procedures. And if you break them and step over the line, there is to be disciplinary consequence. In many instances, and especially here in New York State, since this is where I live, this is where I govern over 56 branches, we've had a law here that maintains secrecy of our police and our correctional facilities and our firemen. And what we are doing, we have four things that we're doing. Number one, we are asking our leaders in the Assembly and the Senate to reconvene the legislature and to reappeal the law. It's 508. It's a law that covers secrecy that, as you know, with Eric Garner, it took 5 years to remove the person who murdered him, the policeman who murdered him. We had to go through hoops and demonstrations and protests, and nothing happened until the mayor and the police commission made a decision. As you saw in many, after they made a decision that day, the mayor fired the one officer. And then in recent days, all three has the other persons who stood by. So we are asking in New York State that we put this law into the bill into law, and therefore it will make our community believe in transparency and believe that no one is above the law. So that's the first thing we're doing. The second thing we are doing is saying that every citizen should participate and fill out the census form. Third thing is that we will have a primary in New York State on June 23rd, and election is November. So everyone has been locked in for 3 months now. And so we are saying, and we got the legislation to move on absentee ballot. Every voter in New York State have received an application by mail with a return postage envelope. If you fill that out, you send it to your Board of Election, you will receive a ballot with the names of the persons who are seeking elections for Congress, for state office, state legislators, senators, and assembly persons. And so you don't have to go and stand in a crowd and do social distance. You fill out your ballot in your home and mail it back. So we're encouraging people to do that. The next thing is register and vote. After we protest, how do we get people out of office? By participating in a democratic process. You vote for the persons that you feel, the person that have presented policies and their visions to your community. And so if we do that, we can move it along, and especially in New York State, if we repeal Section 58. And so I would hope that every person that is listening today would do that, will begin to call and email their elected official. They can be Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, whatever. As long as they in the Assembly and the Senate, they must vote.
Well, I'm so glad that I had you on at this time. It's a horrific time. We had talked about how we needed to have you on regularly, even once a month in advance of the vote, because the last time, you were on, you mentioned how that vote was even more important than the vote for Barack Obama, which many people obviously felt wasn't that important based on the turnout. But I am concerned that I still see, particularly here in New York, where, as you said, we have progressive people that are dismissing the importance of the vote, that are stating that it doesn't matter whether Trump is in office or not, and the systemic racism and the lack of convictions. So what is your response to those who feel that it doesn't make a difference?
Well, if you feel that way, then you're part of our problem. You're not helping with solutions. And so if you use your energy to protest, that's good. But after protest, what do we have? We must have laws and policies that we can hold people accountable for. I've spoken to many young people during this period about education. We need to participate in voting for persons that we believe will lead the cause for equality and justice. Staying home and not participating is not getting an answer to the issues that afford us. Listen, even for the pandemic, we at the beginning didn't have testing in our communities, especially the communities that was hit the hardest, which was African Americans, Latinos, and senior citizens. We got involved. The NAACP got involved. We called our elected officials. We said, listen, we don't need people just to have to make reservations, an appointment. We need to have access to the testing. And guess what? We got it in our community. We have, right today, we have churches that they're doing. I took my test at Convent Baptist Church. We have 2 churches today. We have Mother Zion on 137th Street. We have Mount Nebo. In Brooklyn, they have it. In the Bronx, they have it. All you need to do is walk in, and you don't make an appointment, you stand in line. But we have it in our community. So no one thought about it in the beginning. We had to demand and request that it comes to our community. And how do we have the power to do that? Because we went to our elected officials that we have gotten elected and represent us from the city council to the state and to the federal level. And so that's the power that you use. There is power in participating in the democratic, and I don't mean the small d, I mean the capital D, democratic process.
Well, as
You have to be a Democrat. It means you have to participate. People listen to you if you participate. And that's been the problem for our communities. We have not participated in our numbers that we should.
well, what do you say to people who say, gee, we have a democratic state. It took 5 years for this cop who basically murdered Eric Gardner to be
Not basic,
fired.
he did. He
Right.
did.
You
He
know,
murdered Eric Gardner, just as George Floyd.
yeah,
They murdered Abba Diallo, okay?
exactly.
It wasn't that this was accidental.
Right. And this is what,
There's a way that policing can be done without the murdering.
what is to prevent that from happening? I think that's why this has been such a convergence of people protesting, thousands and thousands.
Absolutely. You have to have a law, accountability. No one is above the law. And once we have a law on the book and policy in every profession, doctors have an oath that they take, teachers have policies and laws that they have to be governed by, everybody. And so the police should do that too. They take the oath of office that they have to protect us. Well, if they protect us, you shouldn't be murdering us.
Yes. How do we get those laws on the books? Because
by writing, by calling our legislative leaders, the governor, and all the representatives that represent you in the assembly and in the Senate. You call them, you write them, and tell them your name, and tell them what district you live in, and tell them you are their constituency. But you can't say you're a constituent if you don't vote.
okay.
No information will go in the file G. But if you are a constituent, everybody respond to Hazel Dukes, because ever since she's been 18 years of age, you go and look at her record, she has never missed voting. If they had dog picture, I would be voting for it, because they might catch my dog.
Well, Hazel Dukes, for all of those listeners, the 2 listeners and viewers, since we're on Zoom, that might not know of your legendary, record as a civil rights activist, and also president of the NAACP New York State Conference. I'm sure it's not just looking at your voting record, but the fact that you do lead such a large segment of the population. So for those who may feel, okay, it's just my voice, certainly I would think by not only them adding their voice, but also joining the NAACP and any of these other community organizations that mobilize people, that pressure their representatives, that could be helpful. Right? Do you
Absolutely, I agree. We work together in a coalition. I work with my sister, Abba, at the Urban League, New York State Urban League. I work with NAN, National Action Network. We work together. I worked with my senator, Brian Benjamin. I work with my assemblywoman, Inez Dickens. I have a connection. I live in Harlem, and I serve on the community board here in Harlem. So there's ways for you to participate without sitting home complaining and saying what no one else is doing. There's something that all of us can do as citizens.
Well, I have done some research and found out that there are actually 2 bills that are still, to my surprise, not passed. One of which is the HR 40, which I know there was a big hullabaloo about that. and I had thought that that had passed. And there's also the Eric Gardner chokehold legislation that was supposed to be passed and still hasn't been passed. So what is the next step when people do find out about these areas, even with a Democratic Congress?
There's 12 bills. There's 12 bills in New York State under the criminal justice bill that is headed by 58. There's other bills that Eric Gardner, we are looking at an Eric Gardner bill for New York State, as well as the federal level. The Congressional Black Caucus have a bill at the federal level, have support from our Senator Chuck Schumer. We believe that we have support, well, not believe, the governor said it on TV, that if the legislators send him the bill, 58, he would sign it. And so that's why it's important that we speak. Let the legislators know that, yes, this is what New York State want. We want transparent. We want everybody to know no one is above the law. Once you break the law, disciplinary action happens to you. Whether it's losing your job, whether you put on probation, whatever it is, that's in a policy.
Okay.
And so that's why all the bills that is there dealing with criminal justice, we want them passed.
What else is on that bill? And are these bills that have been generated since George Floyd, or were they just sitting there anyway and nobody was paying attention?
Some are new, but 58 has been there. and that's why we asked him to repeal that law, okay? The mayor of the city of New York said he's for it. Even some of the people in the criminal justice system have said they are for it. So if you do your job, you don't have to worry about this bill. You perform your job, you go home to your family, which we want to go to. Don't you know we fought for African Americans to be on the police force? We fought for African Americans and women to be firemen. So if we fought for it, we care about your life. We respect you.
So why do you think that that bill, the 58, had just still been sitting there?
Because we have the powerful unions, the PBA, that do not want to abide by law. They want to do lawing, but they don't want to abide by it. And the time is up, as Reverend Sharpton said yesterday at the service. This is our time. We are law-abiding citizens. Everyone have bad apples in their group. And most certainly that says something about the police departments and people in criminal justice across this country.
So that bill,
and sometimes that's not for you as a profession. Sometimes you don't need to be in that profession. Just like teachers don't need, if you don't like children, you shouldn't be a teacher. If you can't teach, you shouldn't be. And a policeman, if you can't interact with all segments of the community, then that's not the profession for you to be in.
So are you saying that the unions may have influenced some of the members of Congress not to pass it?
Not only Congress, but our state legislators.
Now, and this goes back to the point that many have made, or some have made, in justification of the riots, that it seems as though nothing's done until people riot, because we've been protesting obviously for years and years and years, and these laws should have been passed, and we now even have a Democratic Congress. Of course, we don't have a Democratic Senate, so they can still push that back.
Absolutely. But we have made progress.
What is the progress?
When Dr. King died for the sanitation workers, they didn't have a union. That's why he went there. They got unionized. We didn't have the protection for voting, the voting rights. That was because Dr. King went in and told Lyndon Baines Johnson that's what he wanted, and we got it. And so we have made some progress. But when we don't continue to participate, those who just went out and voted for Obama the first time and stayed in their inauguration gown and didn't think it was important to vote the second time, that's when he couldn't do his real job.
Yeah.
So you have to stay with it. This being an advocate for civil and human rights is not for the faint of heart. This takes work, it takes commitment.
You've got to stick with it. It's a
Absolutely.
daily, lifetime practice. And I do recall that for 2016, the NAACP had a slogan, something like "Vote, your life depends on it."
Absolutely.
And
we have a hashtag now. Go and look. No more dying.
yes, I've seen that.
Okay?
I've seen.
So
and
we tired of dying. We
Yeah.
tired of dying. So what do we do to stop dying? Those are the questions that each person have to ask themselves. You have to make a commitment, a personal commitment. You don't make a commitment to the NAACP. Although we've been around 111 years, you have to make your own commitment that you're going to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
So have you gotten calls in this past week from the legislation or anyone that is saying, hey, look, Ms. Dukes, we are going to, get this passed? I mean, obviously you said the mayor and the governor will get it passed if the bill comes forward, but then it still needs the votes, I guess, to get that.
Well, that's why we are asking you and every New Yorker
So
to
it's not a done deal.
to call their elected official and the governor and the mayor and tell them you are a citizen and you are their constituency and you are a voter, and you're asking, you're requesting, you're demanding that this bill be passed. You saying this to your assembly person and to your Senate, that this bill be passed, and the governor has made an open commitment. He said it on TV.
He
He said if they went back to Albany and brought the bill and passed it and sent it to his desk, he would sign it. So we got to hold him accountable.
It did. But can you talk about the differences between the two parties, their platforms, and what they advocate for? Because to this day, there are people that still say the parties are the same. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's not the party, it's individuals. And how you do this, no, NAACP do not endorse candidates.
Right.
We're 501c3.
Yes.
What you do, though, you read, you bring people before you, and you question them. You look at their records. If their record is aligned with your belief and what you want for your children in education, how do they fund education? How do they fund economic development for small business persons? What monies are in the budget to address those? What about access to quality health care? All of those things that is for the Constitution. Every child, regardless of the zip code where they live, whether they're in a shelter, whether they have two parents, or whether grandma is rearing them, should have a quality education. They should receive an education that makes them productive citizens, that they can go out and compete in this world. So what do we need? We're coming into a technology age. What do we need at school? We need teachers who understand the work of the technology field. We need those persons. We need have access to health care. We don't need to go through to the emergency room. We need to have primary care that is affordable in this country. All of this come under the participation in the capital D, democratic process. So you look at records of men and women, where they've been. If this is their first time going into politics, why do you want to be a senator? Do you want to be the president of the United States? What will you do different than what we have now? Will you have compassion for people regardless to where they come from, what they look like? would you not put children in a cage and separate them from their parents? Would you respect all human beings?
All right. Well, at the same time, the president and the Department of Justice are trying to eliminate the Affordable Care Act in its entirety.
That was his first goal
Right.
when he became president. Everything that was
Done by
good for humanity and for the people in America, this administration, and I said without any doubt in my mind, because I read and listen every day, in my mind, have destroyed and decided that they would not be an administration for the people, but it would be for those that they will continue to vote for them to be in power.
Well, you know, and I'm talking about President Trump, said publicly that if we make it easier, getting back to the mail-in vote, easier for people to vote, another Republican would never be elected. So then does it surprise us that if he can say that publicly, that he's going to be doing everything possible to prevent people from voting?
Well, if you look at the record of what has happened in this 3.5 years, you can see the mindset. Nothing has been done to uplift humankind. All of it has been to destroy humankind. And so that's what each person have to look at and say, what kind of world, what country would I like to live in? What do I want to leave for my children and grandchildren? A better world than I have lived in? Or do I want to continue with the rash and hard things that happen daily here in America now? And I believe we have enough people of goodwill, if they just go to the polls, we can have a change in America.
Thank you for joining Inside New York. And of course, you can catch Inside New York every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can access all of our programming on demand. We'll see you then.